economist, and doesn't include any economic analysis by myself or Phil Cowan. But Campbell, if you ever have a conversation with Campbell, and for us as scientists, we might say, well, would you be interested in this bit of research? He'd always come back and say, well, what's the value proposition? And he's very good at asking that question and challenging us. But what's surprised me a wee bit, I think, or what I've observed over the last 2 days, is that we've looked at and talked about pest control with a technical lens and a cultural one, Māori one, and a community one, but we haven't really engaged a lot with an economic lens, and I think it is really important. I'm a taxpayer and a ratepayer. I would like to think that my money and your money is being spent wisely. So I think it's sort of an ethical thing that we need to look very carefully at the economics. So as I said, Campbell asked myself and Phil Cowan not to do economic analysis, but just to review what there was in the literature and the grey literature about the economic benefits. And it's going to be quite a short talk because there's bugger all out there, which again is really surprising given the amount of money that's spent on possum control. You know, what is the benefit that we're getting from that? So we split the report that we did for Campbell into 5 sections. We looked at bovine TB, and fortunately there was a recent review of the benefits of possum control for bovine TB. The productive sector, so that's pasture, forestry, horticulture, but separate from the TB problem. Native biodiversity, feral cats and the toxoplasmosis issue, and then ferrets and stoats and maybe cats again for biodiversity. And one thing, when you start looking at the very few reports that have been done, and there's only 4 or 5, they use different methods, they have different timelines for generating their net present values, and it's very, very hard to compare. So I'm just going to show you what is available and really put out a plea there that there needs to be more of this done. And I'm aware there's probably 2 or 3 economists in the audience, so yeah, I'd welcome any feedback from them at the end or any comment. So, benefits from doing possum control related to bovine TB. Now fortunately, Osprey, who manage the bovine TB program in New Zealand, have to renew or review their national pest management program every few years, and they have just done that recently. And they, like everyone else doing pest management plans, have to look at the economics and what's the economic arguments of spending money on possum control for TB reasons. So the regional economic benefit from possum control related to TB eradication has a net present value of $380 million over 30 years. So that's the reach to the Hawke's Bay region. So a lot of money, a lot of benefit. The catch is the 30 years, that time frame was used because that was the sort of assumption they used to eradicate TB from wildlife, from the possums. If Osprey, Nick sitting down here, is more successful and does it a lot quicker, that benefit will be less, right? So it's assuming that it will take those 30 years to eradicate TB from possums. Part of that 380 million, 103 million, was associated with non-TB benefits. So some of that is biosecurity benefits, just that it's a sort of a side outcome of doing that possum control for TB. But it is, I think, in that analysis focused on the Crown estate. So there are biodiversity benefits on private lands that weren't accounted for, so that would be additional. The other part of the non-TB related benefits is what they called real choice, I think it is. And that is if a farmer might be farming sheep at the moment or growing crops and they want to get into beef or deer or dairy, there's a risk of TB, and therefore they'll choose not to change, and that's a cost on farmers. So part of that cost is captured in that non-TB related benefit. So just on a land area basis for the Cape to City, which is currently about 2% of the regional benefit, so the benefit direct to the Cape to City would be about 7.6 million. But if it was expanded, and I think Campbell talked about expanding to 500,000 hectares, the benefit would be about 133 million over 30 years, and 36 million of that would be from non-TB related benefits. So it's a significant amount, but a lot of uncertainty. The productive sector that's not TB, now this was done by the Agricultural Economic Research Unit, AERU, at Lincoln University, and the economists there. And the benefits to possum control to pasture production is estimated at a value of an MPV of 4.2 million over 30 years, and that's over the total region, not just the Cape to City footprint. And losses to forestry, horticulture and cropping estimated at 1 to 3 million, but that's annually, so that's where they start using different metrics, where it gets very hard to try and compare. Native biodiversity, benefits of possum control to native biodiversity was valued at 1.8 million annually, with an NPV of 19.9 million over 35 years. And that was using some choice modelling methodology. And again, I'm not an economist, so I can't explain the details of that. Other studies used contingent evaluation and willingness to pay, and indicated people would pay from $67 up to $390 per person, per household, per year to protect native biodiversity. So that gives at least some indication of how people value things. It doesn't really tell you the benefit of the outcomes. Now, another cost, I guess, and one that's come up in the conversations over the last 2 days, is feral cats and toxoplasmosis. So I'm not sure whether you all know, cats carry a parasite that goes through mice and sheep, and it causes abortion in sheep. So there's a significant cost to farmers. They deal with that currently by vaccination, and I think to the farming community, the cost is around about $900,000 a year. So, you know, it's a big cost to the farming community. So, again, it's been estimated that if we can control cats and eliminate toxo, there'll be a benefit of 15 million annually, assuming the current use and cost of vaccination. Because even with vaccination, there's still loss of production. And that's significant. So ferrets and stoats, what's the benefit? What's the economic benefit of controlling those species? Well, the answer is goodness knows. There's been no estimates that we could find and that we're aware of that can estimate that or has tried to estimate that. But ferrets do have a role in TB management. So if you've got an area that's high in rabbits, you're likely to have high ferret numbers. At those high ferret numbers, they can maintain the disease. So doing ferret control in those areas might have a benefit to TB management. It's likely to be small, and yeah, the extent of it, yeah, it's just, again, we just don't know. There's no quantitative economic information available on the benefits of controlling those species to biodiversity. But using contingent valuation and willingness to pay, the values to protect native biodiversity are likely to be similar to those of possums, but they may not be mutually exclusive, because if all species are predating on the same species, removing one species may not, they're not operating separately, so it's a wee bit of a complication there. So just to summarise those potential benefits, So possum TV, NPV of about 277 million over 30 years, and I've just separated the non-TB values there. 103 million over 30 years. Possums and pasture, 4.2 million over 30 years. The forestry horticulture, 1 to 3 million annually. Predators and biodiversity, 20 million over 35 years. Cats and toxoplasmosis, 15 million annually. Ferrets, stoats, cats, and their effect on biodiversity, lots of question marks. So in conclusion, most benefits are likely to accrue from possum control as part of the Osprey TB program. But as I said, if that's short and if they're successful and do it a lot quicker, then those benefits will be a lot smaller than I showed. Where rabbit numbers are high and the control of ferrets for TB might be beneficial. There might be a benefit there, but again, that hasn't been estimated. Control of feral cats to reduce impacts of toxoplasmosis infection, and the effect of that on the sheep industry has significant potential economic benefits, but the likelihood and cost of achieving those requisite reductions in feral cat numbers to eliminate the disease needs to be evaluated and compared to the efficacy and cost of vaccination, because controlling cats has a cost as well, and it might be cheaper to vaccinate. Although the impact of predators on biodiversity values are relatively well understood, and perhaps on ecosystem services, so the impacts, the economic value of mitigating these impacts is very poorly quantified. And there's a big gap there. Contingent valuation willingness to pay approaches consistently show New Zealand as attach a high value to native plants and animals and the need to protect them. So we do value them highly, and that's come through in various other speakers. And something I've added in here, there's clear evidence from market surveys indicate that the international market value biodiversity and the clean green sources for primary products, but there are no dollar estimates available for the green credentials and what they're worth. So we all feel that they're important and they might be quite large, but we don't actually have any figures. So to finish off with just some management context, again, just reiterating what I've already said, there are potentially major economic benefits, but these are really poorly quantified, and it still surprises me that that's so. Production impacts can be relatively easily quantified economically, but biodiversity impacts are more difficult to quantify economically. And it'd be interesting to maybe get some feedback on whether we actually need to value those benefits, or do we just accept that Kiwi are worth protecting? We don't actually need to put a dollar on that side of the equation. And if that's the case, then it's all about just doing the control as cheaply as we can to get the benefit that we want. So I'll finish there. Thank you.